speaking of money in politics, let's move on to the Supreme Court case involving, or the Supreme Court's decision actually not to hear a case involving Stephen Donziger, something that this show has certainly covered over the years. Ryan, basically you have on Monday Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh dissenting from the court's decision not to review a lower court's ruling involving Donziger's case. He was sentenced to 6 months in prison for contempt of court. You know this case.
Serving like 3 years in the end.
Right. And you know this case much better than I do. But the dissent was really interesting. It basically gets over separation. It gets into separation of powers questions, which is where you see Gorsuch and Kavanaugh dissenting and where you see interesting decisions from the ostensibly liberal members of the Supreme Court. What did you make of this?
And we were just last segment talking about an administrative state and the right's hostility toward it. And I suspect that that's where some of this is coming from.
Absolutely.
Why the liberals wouldn't side here and why Gorsuch and Kavanaugh fell down the way they did. But I think Gorsuch and Kavanaugh are right on this one. So to recap for people who haven't followed this, the key thing to understand here, so Donziger represented plaintiffs who were suing Chevron in Ecuador. Chevron requested that the case go down to Ecuador and be handled there, where they thought they had a better chance of prevailing. As Neil Gorsuch writes in his dissent, Chevron would live to regret that decision because there's a $9+ billion verdict against Chevron that Donziger won. Chevron then comes back to New York, back to the United States, and starts fighting Donziger there, saying that it was unfair the way that Donziger was able to manipulate and bribe the court, et cetera, in order to give him this in order to win this verdict, which is just hilarious to hear one of the wealthiest and most powerful organizations on the planet saying that you got beaten by these indigenous plaintiffs down in Ecuador, and just completely unfair
like
in the court.
A hippie lawyer.
Yeah, in the court that they asked to be sent down to. So. They get back to the United States. The judge demands Donziger turn over all of his electronic equipment in order to kind of go on a fishing expedition to see if they can prove these Chevron allegations. He says no, that's a massive violation of attorney-client privilege, et cetera, et cetera. The judge holds him in contempt, refers to the Department of Justice for a criminal prosecution. The Department of Justice looks at it and says, no, thank you. We are going to use our prosecutorial discretion, and we are not going to prosecute this contempt case. Go on about your case. Leave us out of this. The judge then appoints a private prosecutor from a law firm that had done business with Chevron, and the private attorney then prosecutes this contempt charge. Donziger is prevented by the same judge from having a jury. Instead, it's the judge who is prosecuting him.
It's bizarre.
That finds him guilty and then sentences him to prison. And so Donziger has appealed, and the appeal is narrow on the question of whether or not the judge had the legal or the constitutional right to appoint this prosecutor. And I would encourage people to read Gorsuch's dissent. It's short. It's signed by Kavanaugh. It's very clear. He makes the point. He says, look, nobody thinks that the executive can appoint my law clerks.
I have the quote right here.
Yeah, go ahead.
He says, the notion that the Constitution allows one branch to install non-officer employees in another branch would come as a surprise to many. Who really thinks that the president may choose law clerks for my colleagues, that we can pick White House staff for him, or that either he or we are entitled to select aides for the Speaker of the House? Why do judges on the left not join a dissent like that?
If they had, there's 3 liberals left in the court. If they had and they joined with these 2, they could have vacated this conviction.
Absolutely.
So why didn't they? My guess, and they don't have to give a reason when they reject cert. They can just say, we don't want to hear this. My guess goes back to the administrative state, that they were worried that if this judge's appointment of this prosecutor is ruled invalid, then somehow they're going to peel that back and say, okay, well then OSHA is also unconstitutional, or the EPA is unconstitutional, something like that, which I think is just absurd. Like, first of all, the idea that you can capitulate away and the right is going to stop coming after OSHA or the EPA is absurd. Like,
Or not.
you're coming for it. Like it's happening. Whether this
I want dirty water
Yes,
and dirty
that's
air,
right.
and I want it
and
now.
unsafe conditions in all workplaces.
Yes.
Damn it. But so whether this particular case went that way, I don't think is going to affect that broader war at all. But also, the liberal justices are liberal when it comes to kind of civil rights and cultural issues over the years.
Yeah.
But if you look at cases that the Chamber of Commerce has weighed in on, liberal justices often are siding with the Chamber of Commerce. So it's not as if, in other words, they're not going to stick their neck out to buck Chevron.
Yeah. Now, I remember when Ketanji Brown Jackson was up for confirmation, I interviewed Marsha Blackburn about some of her plans for it and asked specifically if her staff was reviewing Jackson's record on sort of corporate powers. And she told me yes. I don't know whether or not that was the case, but that's what she said. And I think it's kind of an interesting question as to whether you see that realignment start hitting the Supreme Court, because corporate powers on the right, one of the big things they challenge when it comes to ESG, when it comes to DEI, is in fact this sort of like corporate consolidation of powers and the way that they're used. But at the same time, the right's entire institutional judicial movement is fairly Chamber of Commerce friendly. So it would take a lot of like unwinding, but I think it's a good point too, because you see it on the left as well. That the sort of institutional progressive legal movement is tied up in many ways with the political establishment.
And we'll just wrap with Gorsuch here. He concludes, however much the district court may have thought Mr. Donziger warranted punishment, the prosecution in this case broke a basic constitutional promise essential to our liberty. In this country, judges have no more power to initiate a prosecution of those who come before them than prosecutors have to sit in judgment of those they charge. In the name of the, quote, United States, two different groups of prosecutors have asked us to turn a blind eye to this promise. Respectfully, I would not. With this court's failure to intervene today, and he goes on to say, I hope that this doesn't become precedent, because how absurd would that be? Like then we're in the kind of like the Spanish court where the judges become the prosecutors, which, all right, if you want to have that system, but that's not the one that we have.
No, not at all. No. Not even close.
No.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Saagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us, and if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.